All right, Barry, it's showtime.
It's showtime, Phil.
It's showtime, baby.
It's showtime, baby.
It's showtime, folks.
Come on, Bubba, it's showtime.
Showtime, bitch. Showtime. Hey, Ringo, showtime. Okay, Trey, showtime.
Showtime, Trail.
Showtime.
Showtime. Showtime.
Showtime. Don't say it. Please, don't say it.
No, I have to say it, Mitch. Showtime.
Ed Berliner, the fastest show in sports.
Greetings, true believers. Welcome back into the fastest show in sports. I am your host and your ringmaster, Ed Berliner. Thanks so much for joining us both on the audio podcast and on the YouTube channel. We are a violent nation. Let's get right to it. We are a nation where it seems to me, at least in sports, if you're not being physical, if you're not beating the snot out of somebody, then you're not a man, you're not a woman, you're not a real competitor. But not only that, that sort of leans us into the influence of sports, who we really are in sport. That brings us to combat sports, to UFC, to MMA, to boxing, and so much more, and all these other sports and how it all relates to who and what we are. I could only think of one individual to bring in on this to talk about because I have been a fan of his for many, many decades, from years of the New York Post, the New York Daily News, and it also is interesting to note that in the background, you'll see that he has a pair of boxing gloves, which is exactly why I became a big fan of Wally Matthews over the years, was his writing about boxing from so many places, ESPN, Yahoo, my God. Journalist, sportscaster, author, everything. He is the man about town. Wally Matthews joins us on the fastest show in sports. There are two things, Wally. First of all, I did not know that you were from Astoria.
Oh, yeah.
And I learned that recently. My dad was born in Astoria and grew up in Astoria. So there's always that 1 degree of separation.
We were there before it was hip, though. That was way before it was hip. It was pretty cheap to live there when I was there. Now I could not afford to move back.
It was cheap to live there, and I think a lot of people were looking to get out of Astoria at the time.
Yes. Well, my parents did. They could not wait. It's interesting you mentioned the boxing gloves. You didn't mention my Wolfman or Dracula poster on the wall right next to him.
I did not. Wait a minute. I did not see that. Look at that.
My two obsessions, horror movies and boxing. Those gloves, believe it or not, were worn by Ray Mercer in his gold medal winning fight at the 1988 Olympics.
Oh, my.
And they are signed by everybody on that team. And you remember who that was. That was Roy Jones. That was Riddick Bowe. That was Kennedy McKinney, Michael Carbajal. I mean, some really, really good fighters. And it's the only piece of memorabilia that I own. And I offered it back to Mercer last year. I offered them back to Mercer at in Canastota at the Boxing Hall of Fame induction. And he said, no, man, you keep them. I was very happy. I said, okay, I will. But they will never be sold. Those are mine.
You know, after all the years, I've got a couple of boxing gloves that are signed. I think one of them is signed by Mickey Ward. Another one, I can't even think. But I have in my collection, and it's a shame I should have brought it out. I have a Rock'em Sock'em Robots.
Oh, man, yeah.
One of the originals. And when I was hosting Sports Pulse in Boston for several years, I used to bring boxers into the set and into the studio, and I would always challenge them to a boxing match on Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And Bob Trieger at the time, Bob Trieger's a great friend, public relations man in Boston. You know Bob.
Yes.
He was involved in getting me involved in a lot of the blow-by-blow of fights when I was working up there. And he was in the studio that night that Mickey Ward came in, and I challenged Mickey Ward to Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and I kicked his ass.
Wow.
And
now,
Bob
if the Rock'em Sock'em Robot was actually Mickey, it would have gotten up repeatedly. Mickey's a great dude, man. I had never met him before last year, and he's just lovely, wonderful guy.
Bob has always come up to me and he said, I'm one of the few people who can say that I was there when you kicked Mickey Ward's ass. I said, even if it's not Rock'em Sock'em, I'll go ahead and take it. Let's start with that because let's start in boxing because there is so much shared history that we have. You have so much more than I, and I have grown up as fan and blow-by-blow guy, and we talked about it before we even came on the air, how I used to look forward to Saturdays and being around boxing and watching good boxing and being there. Boxing sucks. It is one of the most useless things that I can think of in sports these days because it simply doesn't grab me. It doesn't reach out. It used to grab... Look, Bert Sugar, our great friend, used to say that Americans love big things. They loved big cars, big-breasted women, and big heavyweights is what they always wanted to watch. They're not there anymore. The fighters are terrible. The fight's terrible. We have Jake Paul sitting there, who is part of it right now, who is the downfall of this sport. But let's start at the beginning. When did boxing go off the rails, Wally? What was that seminal moment?
First, let me just say something about Bert Sugar. I loved him, and I miss him terribly because now I have to pay for my own drinks.
He was wonderful.
Yeah, when did it go off the rails? I'll tell you when. I think the roots of it are when amateur boxing changed its rules. I really do. When they changed it to wearing headgear and they made it more into a kind of a contest rather than a fight. Now, amateur boxing is now all point scoring, and we have the white on the outside of the gloves. I think a lot of people didn't like that form of boxing. I mean, if you recall when the 76 Olympic guys fought, and we're talking about Sugar Ray Leonard, the two Spinks brothers, I'm talking about a great team. Howard Davis is on that team. It was like professional boxing. It was professional boxing, basically only 3 rounds long. When they decided to make amateur boxing a different thing, and then followed by not long afterward, the networks no longer showing it as a featured sport in the Olympics, I think that was the beginning of the end, because how did we get to know Sugar Ray Leonard? From the Olympics, and then from watching him on free TV every Saturday, right? How did we get to know even, Riddick Bowe or De La Hoya? Same thing. But little by little, the networks gave up on boxing. Amateur boxing became less interesting. I can't name the last American to win a medal in an Olympics. I can't recall. I think it was a woman. Honestly, I think it was.
Can you name even the last boxer to have a chance at winning a medal? Nobody knows who these amateurs are.
Because it's not on television anymore. Right. NBC, when they bought the Olympics, decided, and I've heard this with my own ears because I worked for them on a couple of Olympics. The Olympics is a women's event. So we're going to market it. Now, of course, women are very much into boxing now, so maybe they'll come back and put boxing on the air. But they felt in the 80s and the 90s that we will sell more if we show, figure skating, if we show more swimming, if we show more, track and field. Nobody wants to see boxing.
Well, it was almost at that point where somebody made the decision that Americans no longer want to see, or we don't want to broadcast, violence. I heard that from a programmer one time, where he said to me, there's too much violence in boxing. There's a possibility of blood going in the camera. And look, I even said that is indeed a possibility, because when I called a fight in Providence, Rhode Island one time in a women's boxing match, it was, Jamie, oh God, I can't even think of him now off the top. Jamie Clampett and Missy Fiorentino. It was the only fight I've ever done blow by blow on that I got bloody. I had a tux that had to go out because it was cross me when the fighting was there. But he said to me, we don't want boxing on network television because we don't want the violence. I said, but that's what the sport is about, man.
And that's a load of horseshit too, because the networks thrive on cop shows and violence, and and the American public loves to go to movies where people blow up and fall off buildings, and so it's complete bullshit. That's not it. That's not it at all. I think the Dooku Kim and Mancini fight definitely had an effect, because the man was basically killed on the air. I don't think they want to see that. But to say that they didn't want to see blood, that's bullshit. Because what's bloodier than MMA? What is bloodier than MMA? And it's actually designed to be bloody because of the fact that they use the small gloves. That's designed to cut the skin. I mean, that's what that's all about. By the way, I got bloody in many, many fights. And I once was the proud possessor for a very short time of a tooth that was knocked out of Mitch Green's mouth by Mike Tyson.
Now, wait a minute. Was that in the ring, or was that in the bodega?
No, it was in the ring. This was legitimately knocked out.
Okay.
So this was on my desk. It landed like on my laptop, and it was between rounds. I happened to be close to Green's corner, so I kind of flipped it to them. It was pre-AIDS. We had no problem touching bloody things. But, I mean, look, that's part of the game, and that was always part of the game, and that's an excuse. Listen, why do TV execs make any decision? It's always based on money.
Money.
Always based on money. So clearly, boxing was costing too much or not making enough for them to put it on. That's the only reason. I mean, don't give me the blood. If that's the case, let's go back to, the 24 hours of programming of Ozzie and Harriet and, the Partridge Family. Don't even waste my time with that bullshit.
When we look at... The amateur boxing is one side, but let's take it from the management side of things, from the promoters side of things. And of course, all of the various bent left noses and a lot of that went on and the incredible amount of bullshit that went on from promoters at that time. How much of what went on there was that, because you have amateur boxing as one point where boxing went off the rails, but with everything in the way boxing was being run, the way matches were being made, the way fighters were being given a shot, when did that and how did that take it off the rails?
Well, I think that only really inside boxing people care about the promoters and the matchmakers and all that. But I think what did hurt is the multiple championships. You know, it used to be, there was one heavyweight champion and we all knew him. Now you've got, 64 guys claiming to be heavyweight champions. So when you have more than one champion in anything, you don't have a champion. It's as simple as that. When you get the WBA, the WBC, the IBF, WBO, there's probably more now. I don't pay enough attention because, that's one of the things that really killed my interest in it. All these phony guys claiming to be champions. And then, of course, guys who are unqualified getting title shots because they're kicking back money to the Jose Suleimans or the Mendozas or, the guys who were running the sanctioning organizations. I think that killed it as well. I mean, if you ask anybody on the street right now, who's the heavyweight champion of the world, what are they going to say?
Nobody knows.
They don't know and they don't care. And the guy could walk down Fifth Avenue, at high noon and nobody would stop him.
Well, isn't that a big part
honestly,
of it too?
I can't name who it is. I don't know if it's Joshua, Fury, Usyk, Deontay Wilder. I don't know who the hell it is. It could be anybody.
Isn't it part of it, though, that it needs to be, and this goes back to Bert Sugar and what he said many times, it's got to be an American. You've got to have an American in there somewhere because that captures the networks, that captures the marketing, that captures Madison Avenue. If you don't have an American in there, they look at, oh, wait a minute, okay, let's see. We have a Russian over here. We have a North Korean over here. We have an Australian here. That's it. Wally, I think that's why people don't care.
A guy with a story. I agree, an American would be preferable to get the American audience, but I think it's got to be a guy with a story, Tyson had a compelling story. Right? Tyson had a compelling story. Muhammad Ali had a compelling story. Joe Louis, compelling story. I couldn't tell you anything about, Alexander Usyk. I couldn't tell you very much about, I can tell you a little bit about Tyson Fury, but to go to your point, he does have a great story, but he's not an American. And maybe that's one of the reasons why he never really caught on here. But I also think part of the problem is, boxing has killed itself. When you decide that all your events, even your mid-level events, are going to be on pay-per-view, all right? You're going to have to pay for them. You're going to have to go to a website and get a subscription, or you're going to have to pay, DAZN, or you're going to have to pay. Now you've limited your audience to only people who really give a shit. And how many of us are there? When you put a fight on a Saturday afternoon, a casual is going to watch it, right? A casual is going to watch it if the guy is compelling. If it's a Sugar Ray Leonard, I'm sure people who never cared about boxing watched him on a Saturday afternoon. If you're paying your whatever it was at the time, say $50 a month for HBO in the 80s, and Tyson's going to fight Saturday, you know what? I'll stay home and watch this. But now, when it's like, in addition to your cable bill, you now have to fork over $79.99 to watch this event. Who are you getting? You're not getting a widespread audience. You're not getting new viewers. You're getting people who are really into this. And you know what? There are fewer and fewer of them every year.
Why are there fewer people then who are into it? Is it simply that there are no more stories or there's complete confusion about who owns any title at any given time? It seems to me that's almost surface material. There's got to be something else why this sport is dying.
Well, I think it's a combination of all the things you just said. I think also the competition from MMA has not helped, has weeded off some boxing fans, some younger fans. I think it's a younger demographic that watches that. But I truly think, look, I can afford to pay $80 for a fight, but I'm not going to, and a lot of people are not going to. You can watch the Super Bowl for free. You can watch the World Series for free. I got to spend $80 to watch Crawford and Canelo, or $100. You got to be kidding me. I got to spend $100 to watch Jake Paul win a fixed fight. The public is stupid by and large, but they ain't that stupid.
You just used the words which I think need to be used a little more often. You put Jake Paul in the same sentence as the phrase fixed fight. Jake Paul, of course, has come out and said that if anybody dares call it a fixed fight, I'm going to get a lawyer and I'm going to sue you. And of course, everybody laughs like hell at anything like that because all you have to do is watch the absolute bullshit nonsense that goes on in a Paul fight, and you realize that it is made up. It's what I like to call, Wally, contrived controversy in many ways. That contrived controversy that news now works on, sports has done, but boxing does it. Let's create something with Jake Paul. Jake Paul is the death knell of professional boxing, is he not?
He's absolutely the death knell. He couldn't fight his way out of my boxing class at the Huntington Y. Tyson threw the fight. There's no doubt he was paid not to hurt Jake Paul. Same thing with Chavez Jr. I don't know how much money they're spreading around to build this guy up, but, if he fights Canelo and Canelo doesn't win, I guarantee you Canelo was paid not to win. This guy cannot fight, all right? He cannot. He is an amateur boxer, and anybody who falls for him. But, Ed, this is the dumbing down of America, okay? It's the reality TV-ization of America. It's everybody. It's the reality TV presidency where we're all on, every day's a cliffhanger. I'll tell you in 2 weeks whether I'm going to bomb Iran. I'll tell you in 2 weeks when I'm going to have a healthcare plan. I'll let you know. You wait and see. What the hell is this shit? But that's what this world and this country has become. Everybody's waiting for the commercial break, and oh my God, I can't wait to come back and see what's going to be. We used to do radio teases, and you've done radio. You'd say, when I come back, I'm going to tell you why, Derek Jeter will never be in the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
I can't wait to hear what he's going to say. It was just stupidity. I was just trying to get you to come back after the commercial. But now people live and die for this shit. And it's very frightening.
But it is frightening. But why, Wally? You said it. It's the dumbing down of America.
I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, all right? I'd be living on my own island somewhere out, in the Mediterranean. Who knows the reason? I don't know. People have been trained. They have been trained to expect. Well, first of all, look, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but I think the internet has changed all of us. It's changed all of us in terms of how we perceive time, right? Everything's got to happen right now. It used to be if, you went into a store and somebody asked you to wait 30 seconds, okay, no big deal. Now, if my page doesn't load in 5 seconds, I'm going, what the hell is going on here? We've been conditioned for everything to happen like right now. So the thing is, obviously everything can happen right now. So if it can't happen right now, I'm going to give you a tease about what's going to happen. So you'll stick around to see what's going to happen. I really think that this has been I don't know if it's just a confluence of events or if this has been planned, but it certainly has happened over the past 20 years where nobody can wait for anything anymore. There has to be instant gratification. That's why baseball's losing viewers, because it's too slow, right? It's too slow. I have to wait for the guy to pitch. Baseball had to put a pitch clock in so that they could speed up the game.
That's why baseball puts in new rules. You got to speed it up. You got to keep the generation happy.
How bush league is that? In extra innings. Let's put a run. It means it's Little League, right? We'll put a runner on second base. Everything is done to speed up because nobody can sit back and watch. This is why you can't sell a book anymore, because nobody will sit down and read a book. It's why it's the reality TV-ization of the world. Like we're going to have a commercial every 5 minutes. We're going to leave you on the edge of your seat so you cannot wait to come back and see what's going to happen.
It is funny, but every time I say to friends of mine who are in boxing, who have been around it for many years, when I use the phrase boxing is dead. I did it recently to a friend of mine. I'm not going to mention his name because he really is very, very against saying anything negative about boxing. We both know him. Okay. And I said, okay, that's fine. I understand. But I will use the phrase boxing is dead. And he and others will come back at me and say, oh, Ed, stop. Boxing isn't dead. Boxing's just in a lull. That's all it is. Boxing will come back because we always have to have boxing. I can't think of anything that's a greater amount of bullshit in my life, because when you look at this sport, it is dead. Boxing is dead. Wally, maybe we just need to put it away. Maybe we just need to say it's dead, walk away from it, and stop boxing altogether.
Well, I'm going to disagree slightly with you because boxing, I started covering boxing in 1983 or 4, okay? Boxing was dead then, we were told. Boxing is like Hyman Roth in The Godfather, right? So we're dying in the same heart
Good analogy.
For many years. All right? And at the time, boxing was dead. The heavyweight title was going from Greg Page to Tony Tubbs to Tim Witherspoon to Trevor Berbick and back again. And it was dead. And what brought it back? Tyson, right? That re-sparked the interest in everything. However, the landscape was different. You had HBO, right? You had Tyson used to fight on Saturday afternoons also when he was starting out. Then, HBO discovered him. I think his first pay-per-view, not pay-per-view, but fight where you had actually pay to watch him was on the MSG network. He knocked out some guy, some aluminum siding mechanic or something at the Garden. But then once HBO got a hold of him, people, they will tell you, and I have friends who worked at HBO, that their subscription rates went up when they signed Tyson because people wanted to see him.
Sure.
Now,
because he was a bad
point
man, too, because we were also told what kind of an individual he was. He was a kid who came from a criminal background. I think that grabbed people. That was the reality show sort of idea.
The Cousin the Kid narrative, which turned out to be complete bullshit.
Bullshit.
Like, it was racist as well, and I thought so back then, that this white father figure had tamed the beast, from the jungle of Bed-Stuy, which, is disgusting, but a lot of people swallowed it, and they would swallow that story today. But when I say the environment is different, you no longer have an HBO. And if a Tyson were to come along, you would have to fork over money to watch him on pay-per-view. And how many people would do that? How many people would do that?
Not as many as used to. Used to have millions, now it's 10,000.
And here's the other thing. Who would he beat to make you feel that you have to see him?
That's the next thing. When you look out there and you look at some of the competition that's out there, look, it's always been a case in boxing where you'll have great champions who are on the rise or somebody who they want to go ahead and push forward. They give them the tomato can and the next tomato can. And
that's always throughout history. Absolutely. Because you'll find the same victims in the list of everybody, every great heavyweight on their way up. You see the same names.
I keep going back and I'll show my age. How many times can you put up a Chuck Wepner and see him bleed on cue?
There you go.
But
right. By the way, the networks didn't mind putting him on.
No, they didn't like putting him on because it was bloody at that point. But that's another thing, too. The competition level right now is pathetically appalling. There simply are not, you don't see anybody that's brought up. You don't see, and again, partially to your point, with amateur boxing and the way that's become pretty much a joke. But who do you put in the ring? Again, we go back to Jake Paul, and who do you put in the ring? Washed up has-beens and guys who were out there basically pumping gas on a weekend. And there's nothing to say.
Ed, you can't be a has-been unless you were something.
Okay, fair.
Right? Oh, there are no has-beens. I wish there were has-beens. Larry Holmes would have to come back. I mean, there ain't no has-beens anymore. Like a De La Hoya, threatens to come back.
Where the hell are they finding these people from, Wally? I mean, if you put a decent fight together for me, maybe I'll watch it. But when I look at these guys and I go, who?
Well, in fairness, the Canelo Crawford fight could be decent. It has some interest for me.
Could be.
It has some interest for me because they're both good fighters in their division. But, somebody said to me, and it's a guy I trust a lot and a guy I respect, said he's in the conversation with Sugar Ray Leonard and Hearns and Duran. I said, well, how? Who has he beaten? Who has he beaten that you could say he's in that competition? The best fighter he's beaten is Errol Spence, who looked awful in the fight and had just almost died in a car wreck. I mean, the guy was a completely shot fighter. So tell me the good fighter that he's beaten. And even like Canelo, at least Canelo's got his wins over Triple G, who's a good fighter. Golovkin, good fighter. Fought very well against Mayweather when I think he was like 21 years old. So, I mean, he's got at least a portfolio. But to tell me Terrence Crawford belongs in the conversation with Leonard, Duran, Hagler, and Hearns, you got to be out of your fucking mind. Who did he beat? Who did he beat and who beat him? Well, right now he hasn't beaten anybody and he's probably going to get beat by Canelo. So, let's end that conversation right there. However, having said that, I think it's an interesting matchup because it's always interesting when a guy who dominates one weight class tries to move up against a guy who's dominant in a bigger weight class.
Is it just as simple to say that if you take a Jake Paul, for instance, and I hate to keep coming back to him, but he is the current entree, if you will, in boxing. But if we keep coming back to him,
my life, go ahead.
Is it just the train wreck? Is that it, Wally? People just want it. To me, that's what it seems like. Show me the guy that's going to explode sometime. Something stupid will happen. He'll come out here. He'll be tatted up again. He'll say something stupid. He'll do something stupid. But isn't that why people are now coming to boxing more than seeing the beauty of the sport? It's the train wreck.
That's not a new thing either. Let's not forget, Muhammad Ali, when he was Cassius Clay, his whole persona was based on getting people to hate him because he figured more people hate him, more people come to see him get beat. And, so this is just, and I think.
Yeah, but he was smart about it.
Tyson, huh?
He was smart about it, though, Ali,
He
the
was
way
very
he
smart
played
about
it.
it because he was likable. He was hateable and likable at the same time.
There you go.
Now, Tyson followed that blueprint. Floyd Mayweather, God, I knew Floyd Mayweather when he was an amateur. He was one of the nicest kids I ever knew. But he decided, the way to really become popular, and he was right, was to become a supervillain. It's almost like the WWE model, right? Mm-hmm. You got heels and you got faces, right? So so he did his heel turn and it worked. So now I don't think Jake Paul's doing anything new here. I mean, this is something that was done all the way. The more people I can piss off, the more people will come to see me get beat. I went to a bar to watch him fight Tyson, and I guarantee you 90% of that bar was rooting for Tyson to take his head off. And by the end, everybody was disgusted, and, the place was silent. If either they were having conversations, not paying attention anymore, or just walking out, because people wanted to see Jake Paul get the living shit kicked out of him.
Well, he's just another punk kid. That's all. He's not anything.
That's part of his appeal. I don't think anybody actually likes him. No, I shouldn't say that. I think there is a punk element in this country now that does admire him and feels like, they would like to be like him. Like the best description I ever heard of Donald Trump. He's a weak man's idea of a strong man, a poor man's idea of a rich man, right? And a dumb man's idea of a smart man. And that's exactly, and this is what they want to be. I would like to be like Donald Trump because he's everything I want to be. Well, I think that you have a lot of wannabe tough guys out there who look at Jake Paul and go, God, I would like to be him. He's the guy that I emulate. And I think that's pretty sad.
Isn't that, and another phrase that you used here, you used the words punk element. Is it fair to say that punk element in American society right now is no better characterized and seen than in MMA and UFC fighting? It is
Without a doubt.
And I have said that to friends of mine before where I have used the phrase human cockfighting, and I have got my best friend in the world who is a huge fan of it. He's also a PR rep who has people in UFC that he represents. And he says, come on, Ed, it's not human cockfighting. It's no worse than boxing. Guys beat the shit out of each other in boxing. They do it in MMA. But I keep coming back to him and saying, this is more sociological than anything else. This is looking at people who are just enjoying watching the blood, the beating, getting right down as far as you can and destroying somebody. It's cathartic for these people. They want to see it.
The boxing crowd is similar, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Bloody.
Here's the thing. No, but here's the thing. MMA, and I've written this line, is like boxing's ugly cousin. It really is. It's graceless. It is artless. It is not pleasant to watch for me. To me, they really can't punch. They don't punch correctly. I'm not interested in watching two men roll around on a floor together. If I wanted to watch that, I go to 42nd Street or something. I don't want, it's ugly to me. Okay. To me, boxing is beautiful and fluid when done well. All right. To me, the perfect fight is where nothing touches the other guy but your knuckles and his knuckles touch you. I don't want to see grappling. I don't want to see clinching. I don't want to see any of that shit. I want to see clean punching, right? That's what it's all about. 20 years ago, I covered a fight with Michael Grant and Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis, very talented guy. Whether he's an all-time great or not, I'll leave it to other people. But talented guy. The fight was a mess. They grappled. They rolled on the floor. It was just terrible. And even though Lennox Lewis, I think, won by a second round or third round KO, just blitzed Michael Grant, I ripped him in the paper the next day. I said, because the heavyweight champion should not be rolling around in the street with a drunk. And that's basically what he was doing. To me, that offended me. So if that offended me, you can imagine what I see when I see MMA. To me, it's not really boxing, but it's cartoonish violence. The small gloves allow people to get bloody right away. So it gives the illusion of being more violent than boxing. The truth is, when you're down on your knees punching somebody, you have no power. You're hitting with your fist. You know what your fist weighs? You know what the human fist weighs? 14 ounces. So if you're down there going like this, you're hitting the guy with 14 ounces of force. There's nothing there. Boxers stand on their feet, okay, and transfer their weight. So their fist no longer weighs 14 ounces. It weighs every ounce of their body.
There is a kinetic connection to boxing.
Absolutely. Which is why when boxers and MMA fighters engage in a boxing match, the boxer always wins because they hit much, much harder. The MMA fan doesn't understand this. This is the dumbing down of America. They just see the blood and and they think, oh my God, this is so violent. The other thing is a combat sport really a combat sport when one competitor can quit if things aren't going his way with no loss of honor?
It's a good point. That's
right?
not a combat
The thing
sport.
that makes
That's a
boxing
surrender
compelling
sport.
is that when you get in there, you're fighting theoretically to the death. You are not going to quit. Now, I'm not making a moral judgment on whether that's right or wrong, but that's the compelling thing about it. Once two men are in the ring, they are going to fight until one of them is not standing anymore. In MMA, it's like, it's not working today. Okay, I'm out. I'll come back next week. Well, you know what? You do that in boxing and you are blackballed. It happened to Roberto Duran, one of the greatest fighters of all time.
However, the MMA purist will say that, well, wait a minute, they tap out because they're in danger of being seriously hurt. That's always the excuse I hear.
Because they're in danger of being killed. That doesn't make any sense. It's idiotic.
Right.
It's idiotic. I've had MMA guys say that to me. Well, he's going to break his arm. I said, well, that's wonderful. Boxers stay in risking brain damage and death, and you're worried about a broken arm? Like, get the fuck out of here. I'm sorry. It's not even comparable. I don't know how you feel about bullfighting. All right.
I am not a fan of bullfighting. I think bullfighting should be banned around the world.
Okay, fine. And I'm an animal lover, and I don't believe in the killing of animals. I think hunters are pussies and cowards and people who shoot deer and think they should all be shot themselves. But I will tell you this. The drama of a bullfight is at the end of the fight, when it's just the torero and the bull, somebody has to leave alive. Somebody has to leave dead. Okay. And it becomes very dramatic. I don't know if you've ever been to one. I've been to one, and I, like I said, I don't like animals being tortured, but you don't want to see a man get killed by a bull either. You do not want to see a horn going into somebody's gut.
Well, see, to me, that's the reason why it has to be stopped. I mean, there's no reason for it in my mind.
I agree that, but the tension of it is the bullfighter knows he must kill the bull. He cannot leave that arena if that bull is alive. Okay? Now, if a bullfighter did leave that arena and he was unable to kill the bull, he would be castigated throughout Spain or Mexico. Absolutely considered a coward. That is the attraction of boxing as well. We're in there and we're going to fight, man, and I'm not going to quit. If you hurt me, I'm going to just try and come back and beat you. And that's it. And there's no timeout. There's no escape route for me. It's almost like you're on the Titanic now, and you're either going to get in the lifeboat or you're going to drown. It's one way or the other, and if you were allowed to quit in a boxing match, it just wouldn't be the same. It would not be the same. And again, I'll go back to the example of Roberto Duran. This is one of the greatest fighters of all time. He had a momentary brain cramp where he decided, I don't want to do this anymore. And had he died like within a year or two of that fight, that would have been the first line of his obituary. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
That he quit in one of the biggest fights of all time. I mean, thankfully for him, he was able to come back and have an unbelievable second career. And I think it'll still be mentioned in his obit, but it ain't going to be the first thing you remember about Roberto Duran. But I mean, other guys, Tyson quit in his last two fights. I don't know if this new generation that thinks Tyson was the greatest fighter of all time realizes that, but Tyson quit in his last two fights. Took a knee and said, that's it, I'm done. Against Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. And if that doesn't disqualify you from, the conversation of one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, I don't know what does.
When you talk about this generation of fight fan, what does it say about us as a society when we look at the roaring popularity of MMA and UFC? From the 18 to 35 white male who seems to find it as a reason to live, and they get behind it, and it is the most important thing to them. But societally speaking, Wally, that has to say something about the lust for violence or the wanting to be like them in order to take this and say, yeah, this is something I got to see. I'll pay anything to see a good UFC fight.
Be like them, because if they really wanted to be like them, they would climb into the octagon and do it.
Right.
What they want to do is live vicariously.
It's vicarious, yes.
And I'm not going to play psychologist, but clearly there's some kind of a macho problem whereby the masculinity of the people in the ring validates your own because you're there rooting for him. And it's not only, it's a whole generation, it's the gun generation, it's the Confederate flag generation, it's just the overall hostility of people to one another generation. It's been legitimized, I think, by very important people in the United States. It's been told it's okay. Not only is it okay, but you should be this way. This is the way to get things done. Being civilized is not the way to get things done. And I think a lot of people relate to MMA because they see it as a symbol of that whole mindset.
Is it interesting because in boxing, it seems as if when we watched boxing, and an era did watch it, we didn't want to step in the ring and be them. We wanted to sit back.
I will tell you this. As a sports writer for 40 years, I have never heard somebody say, I could get in there and hit Mariano Rivera. I could get in there and sack Aaron Rodgers. I could score a goal on Shesterkin. But I have heard plenty of guys say, I'd get in there and fight Mike Tyson for $1 million. Like, for some reason, dudes seem to think that, boxing is something anybody can do. And it's because, you had a street fight here and there. Do you remember when Dan Dierdorf became the boxing commentator for ABC?
Yes, I do.
About 30 years ago. All right. So they had a press conference, and I didn't think he was qualified at all. And I asked him, I said, what are your qualifications? What prepared you for this? What do you know about boxing? He goes, well, I had a lot of street fights. I said, well, but this is the mindset, I beat up that kid in the street. I could get in with Tyson. They don't realize how much better. They do respect how much better a major league pitcher is than they are. They realize how much stronger, a defensive lineman is than they are. They recognize that they cannot dunk over Michael Jordan, or Steph Curry. They can't, they realize they cannot skate with Sidney Crosby. But for some reason, people think they can fight with Mike Tyson. I've heard.
Is that not though what UFC and MMA is all about right now? You have that, and again, it comes down to that white male, 18 to 35, or even 18 to 45, if you will, who believes, I can do that. I've gotten a couple of street fights before. You want me? I can get in that octagon and do that. Bullshit! You can't do that. It's nonsense. 95% of the people in the world can't do that.
These guys that say to me, I'd fight Mike Tyson. I say, yeah, when the knock comes on the door and they say, let's go, you'd be changing your drawers because you're taking another shit. That way you would not be going out to the ring.
But is that it, Wally? Is it just that macho feel that it's got to be? I go back to it.
I think a lot of it's posing. I think that there's pressure on like disaffected white males in this country to be macho. I don't take any shit. Don't tread on me. Like, get the fuck out of here. I'll tread on you any fucking day of the week. But you have a lot of people out there who just feel like, they have to put forth this front. And it's scary. I mean, that's why you hear talk about, I don't want to delve into politics. That's why you hear talk about civil war and, people with 50 and 100 and 200 guns in the house. I don't get the fascination with violence, but I guarantee you that a lot of the people who feel that way also are invested in MMA.
Can we not say that this began a long time ago? Because I still go back to George Carlin made a great bit one time where he talked about the whole philosophy of lead, follower, get out of the way. I hear lead, follower, get out of the way. Carlin said, when I hear lead, follower, get out of the way, I obstruct. That was always his moment. But he's right. There is a time.
Can you imagine what he would be like today in the current climate? He would be unbelievable.
Carlin would be a master at this point. You'd
this
have to
world
have him.
Needs Carlin.
He'd imagine him going after Fox. That's another story altogether. But this whole lead, follower, get out of the way bullshit nonsense, I think, is what we're into now, and that's what the current generation is into. It's this whole, I have to be this way. I have to be the badass.
Alpha male.
Yes.
Right? Alpha male. Got to be the top dog. Everybody, it's just disgraceful. It really is, because it's not.
But I'll play the other side of the coin here. Let me play the other side of the coin here, though, because there's still people saying, well, wait a minute. You two old guys are sitting there right now, and you used to love boxing. Boxing was two guys beating each other up. So we have it different nowadays. It's a different sport. MMA is our version of two guys beating each other up, and occasionally we like to see two women beating each other up. They'll go, and I've had the generation say this to me, Wally. Say, what's the difference? You guys did the exact same thing. We're just doing it a different way.
That's fine. That's fine. You know what? You're entitled to like what you like, but I'm going to tell you what I like and what I don't like. It's as simple as that, and I can tell you the reasons why. All right. To me, as I said, boxing is better to watch. It's more pleasant, even in violence. It's poetic. I mean,
Think
God,
about that.
show
Pleasant.
me the
You're
MMA
right.
guy. Show me the MMA guy that can rival Sugar Ray Robinson or Muhammad Ali for grace. Show me that. Please show me the MMA guy that could rival George Foreman or Ernie Shavers for punching power. Show me the MMA guy that could rival Joe Frazier or Larry Holmes for guts, for getting up again and again and again and winning after being knocked down. No, I got knocked down. I'm out. I'll come back next week. Show me anybody who is. Show me the MMA fight where a guy gets knocked down 3 or 4 times and comes back to win. Show me it. I'm sitting here.
Is it also fair to say that there's a segment of that population that likes to see women beating the crap out of each other? I mean, I'm telling you, I think there's a point in there, and I've read a lot of the sociological studies on this, and it talks about how women like to see it because they're beating each other up, and the guys like to see it too because there's 2 girls grappling and fighting each other.
Having followed the P. Diddy trial, I'm sure that you're absolutely right. But I'll tell you what, I covered quite a few women's boxing matches, and some women fighters are great, but I don't want it to sound male chauvinist, but I cannot stand to see women get beat up. I really can't. I covered a fight once where Christy Martin just beat the living hell out of this girl in Madison Square Garden. She cut over both eyes. I just couldn't watch it. I could not watch it. And if it was 2 men, I'd be fine with it. It's like, it's part of the game. Okay. But I just could not see a woman get disfigured that way. And anybody who does like that, I think has some serious problems.
See, I think that's, and I agree with you on that because I remember back in New England when I was working for CN8, Comcast, and the show Sports Pulse, and I was doing the blow-by-blow on boxing that we broadcast, and I got a couple of female fights, and I got a female fight between, we talked about this before the show, Missy Fiorentino and Jamie Clampett. And Jamie Clampett was an up-and-comer at that point. Missy Fiorentino was this little spark plug who was about 4 foot nothing, and she could take a punch and give a punch, and it was by the second round, the blood was flying. My tux was marred with blood across it. I had blood hitting me in the face. And that's when I said to myself, I love boxing, but I can't do this anymore. This isn't boxing. Yeah. This is almost a disfigurement.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. Women's boxing is here to stay. I train boxers now. That's what I do for a living. Right, I do it at the YMCA here in Long Island, and I have a ton of women, and they really like it, and they are dedicated, they're strong, they're aggressive, and I encourage them to. They don't fight, they're not fighters, they just do it as a workout. But I mean, I think we have to understand that women want to be seen as equal in even in the boxing ring. And if you remember the night that the Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fixed fight travesty, Amanda Serrano fought that night against what's her name, Katie from Ireland, and
I didn't see.
She got cut badly over her eye, but the women outfought, outgutted, out everything Tyson and Jake Paul that night, and I had so much pride for them. And I actually went to the fight with some of the women that I trained, and we all were so proud of how well these 2 women fought. But I will tell you, I'm a little squeamish about seeing them get beat up that way.
With regard to women and physical play, everything we've talked about now seems to then point to what's happening in other sports, because there is a rise in the physical nature and the demand by the fan, and also the demand of the player, the coaches, everybody involved, to be more physical. The WNBA is a prime example. There is much more physicality in this brand of the WNBA than there ever was before, and people are saying it's necessary. But some are going back and saying, wait a minute, why does it need to be this way? Why does this physicality need to be there to the point of almost wanting to hurt someone? That's the idea that they're getting here. Are we becoming a little too physical even in sports?
I'm going to defer to you on that because I don't watch a lot of basketball. I know that, I watched some of the NBA playoffs, and the men's game is more physical now too.
Yes.
I think that the object is not. I mean, look, the object in boxing is to hurt. That's it. You're not trying to score points. It's not fencing. It's not. We're not debating here. We are trying to hurt one another. the argument in favor of the NFL, which has, probably as much brain injury as boxing, is that, well, that's not the object is to move the ball. It's not to hurt each other. The object in basketball is not to hurt one another. It's to get to the basket any way you can. And yeah, I mean, I watched, some of the Knicks Pacers, and I was like, God, I would never go down the lane the way these guys are because it's dangerous. It's like you're running a gauntlet. I don't know why it's encouraged. I don't think it's for the fans. I mean, maybe, and I'm guessing here because I don't watch the WNBA, but I'm assuming that the powers that be there want it to be more like the men's game to make it more popular.
Yes.
Is that possible?
Yes. They want it to be more like the men's game, but they want it to be that physical brand of basketball. And the women want to go out in many cases, and they want to prove that they can be just as physical and sometimes just as dirty as the male player. And quite frankly, there's an awful lot of officiating that lets it go.
You're old enough to remember, when there was a big divide between men and women's tennis. And there still is in terms of money. But I mean, the women's game was slower. It was a lot of volleying, and it would go on forever. And the men were crushing the ball. And then along came the Williams sisters. And suddenly everybody, women were now serving at 130 miles an hour. And I think part of the reason is, in order to make money in anything, you do have to appeal to men. I mean, you can't cut out half the population, and if men are bored by women's tennis for whatever reason or bored by the WNBA, well, let's give them what they want to make them watch us.
Well, but the National Football League is the first one to stand up and say that we now get more women than we ever got before because women are getting into what is the play in the National Football League.
Because of the tight pants? I don't know.
Could be. I mean, hey, look, whatever sells, it's all marketing, baby. It's all Madison Avenue and sales.
Well, the NFL's always been sex and violence, right? Cheerleaders and guys beating the crap out of each other. But I mean, the other thing is the NFL makes a public stand of like trying to downplay its violence, right? I mean, you can't really hit the quarterback anymore. You can't come near the punter. We're really worried about CTE. Of course, they're really not worried about any of these things, but cosmetically, they want you to think that, we're toning it down a little bit. And believe me, people don't want that. Even ex-players will tell you, the game's not the way it was when I was there, and you're old enough maybe to remember, I saw Ben Davidson break Joe Namath's jaw. I don't even think he got a penalty for it.
I was just a wee child at that point.
Well, it was the game was different back then. The guys wore a single bar and, just punching each other in the face. And, and I know the guys are bigger and stronger and faster now, but they are kind of handcuffed by the rules. And the older players think today's players are a bunch of pussies, believe it or not.
Well, but are we reaching a point where if you look at the physicality in the game, and you mentioned the words brain injury, which is certainly out there in the National Football League, in the National Hockey League, in professional soccer where there's no headgear whatsoever, and they're talking about various CTE cases and concussions in soccer. But are we looking at a point where simply because the human body can only take so much, Wally, that we're going to have to legislate this, games are going to become a little less physical, and there's going to have to be, as we start to see more players from the National Football League come out in their later years and die from conditions based close to CTE, that we're going to have to start legislating this. And yeah, the games might become a little bit softer.
Well, when you say legislating it, what do you mean? Do you mean that you could actually arrest somebody on the football field for
No, I'm talking about rules-wise and hits and stopping.
Legislating by the league. I mean,
correct.
Right.
No, I'm not talking about outside legislation. I'm talking about.
Can you imagine the cops jumping on the field and dragging a guy off?
No, brother, I was not going there. Please, let's not start that. Somebody will accuse me of that. Watch.
No, but if that was the case, Mike Tyson should have been arrested and dragged out of the ring the night he bit Holyfield's ear off.
Sure.
Because that became a criminal assault. Boxing is classified as unarmed combat, and if you're fighting within the rules, it's legal. But if you do something like that, you've committed a crime. It's no longer a fight; it's now a crime scene.
It's an interesting dichotomy to look at. What's the difference between a boxing event and a crime?
Well, I mean, boxing was illegal for many years. In the 1920s, it was legalized again, and under certain rules. You are allowed to conduct yourself in a certain manner. You're allowed to beat your opponent senseless with your fists. But, if he was on the ground, you started stomping him, I would assume you've now committed a crime. If you bite a guy's ear off, you have committed a crime. But, in Las Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, I guess. But yeah, you could make the case of that. I mean, I'm old enough, and I know I'm a little bit older than you, but I remember when Juan Marichal hit John Roseborough over the head with a bat in a baseball game.
Right.
That's a crime.
Yeah.
You would think that's a crime. That's an assault. Of course, he was disciplined by the league, but police.
But he went after another human being with a baseball bat. I mean,
try that in the street and see what happens to you. All right.
I watched some kind of a Dateline special last night, and it talked about how a grandfather and a wife went after their husband, and they beat him with a baseball bat, and they killed him.
That I believe is a crime.
It is.
I think you go to jail for that. Well, apparently things that happen in a sporting event are not, I guess, prosecutable.
Although I guess you would say at that point, well, the two of them got into the ring and they both know that they had the opportunity to beat each other up, so it's okay at that point. It's not illegal.
Well, they're allowed to do that. But that's legal. That's legal.
Right.
But nowhere in the rules does it say you could step on the guy's face, right? Or bite a part of his body off, or take his arm behind his back and break it. You can't. No, those would be criminal assaults, I would think, if the law was actually enforced
right
to the letter. If they were actually subject to the same laws that you or I would be. If you bit somebody, if you were sitting in the crowd at the Tyson Holyfield fight and bit the guy's ear off next to you, I don't know why you would, but I guarantee you would have been arrested.
Have you seen the prices of concession food these days? I mean,
you're right.
Come on, brother. It's easy and it's right there. It doesn't cost anything. It's not a $52 bucket of popcorn. But are we looking, because you've covered so many sports? I mean, I have as well, but certainly not as in depth as you have. But are we reaching that point where eventually every sport is going to have to be pulled back on the physical nature of it because you will have more people dying?
I don't know. I mean, it's tough to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and as we know, what wags the tail of the dog? Money. And if a more violent NFL or more violent WNBA, if a more violent NHL, I don't know how baseball could be more violent once they were allowed to start throwing the baseball at each other. But I mean, if that generated more money and brought more eyeballs, I don't think, the leagues would certainly fight any attempt to pull back on it. The networks would fight any attempt to pull back on it. I mean, we saw what happened. I mean, Congress got involved in the steroid thing with baseball about 20 years ago. And they did make some headway. I mean, baseball was embarrassed into doing something about it. Otherwise, they would have, Bud Selig would have still said, "I don't know anything about that." So it's just big bullshit. Until
they're using steroids on the field. Oh my God, they're hitting home runs because of steroids. Shock.
So anyway, I think as long as everybody's lining their pockets as a result of this, nothing's going to be done about it. And, why Congress did something about it, I have did something about steroids. I have no idea what.
They got nothing else to take care of. Everything else in the country and every other item has been solved. We're real good now. Now we can go after steroids in baseball because that's what we need to do. Wally, I'm still stunned to this day that no one has ever tried to make rollerball a real sport. Think about it.
That MMA? Wait a minute.
Think about it for just a minute here. If you go back to the original, not that extra one that was made years later that was absolutely terrible. If you go back to the original with James Caan, and you've got motorcycles, you've got people beating each other up, you've got serious injuries, you've got comas, you've got blood.
Sounds like a winner.
It's a winner. I mean, not only that, but let's face it. If you're going to have people beating each other up in the octagon or in a ring, and if you're going to have guys hitting each other in the face in fights that are legislated and allowed in hockey, and you're going to have all these, go for it.
Not only legislated and allowed, but encouraged. When the NHL is marketing videotapes of the greatest fights, what you putting me in a penalty box or something and you're selling on a videotape? Come on, man.
So you're hypocrisy. With all you've done and all the sports you've covered, which one do you get a thrill out of watching these days?
I love baseball. I love baseball. I know, that probably dates me, but first of all, I love one-on-one confrontations, which is why I like boxing. And to me, baseball is just a series of one-on-ones, right? Batter against pitcher. And then you go 9 innings, you get a minimum of 54 of them, and I love watching them. I like watching pitching. I like watching the way batters work the count. I have patience. I can sit and watch a game. I know the younger generation, it's going too damn slow, but and I don't have any illusions that I can hit Aroldis Chapman. I know that ball is coming goddamn fast and it's hard. And I really admire. I think I admire the skill sets in baseball players more than anything. I didn't really cover a lot of baseball until like the last 10, 15 years of my career because I was doing mostly boxing. And when I got to the ballpark and I saw how difficult it was to get a base hit, how much ground those guys cover, how they get to almost everything. And how difficult it is to make solid contact, especially at certain points in the count. I just loved the game. I was like, I would watch it like this, with my eyes wide open the whole game. And that it had a lot of the elements of boxing that I like because of the one-on-one confrontation, This is why I'm not really into football, because there is no one-on-one confrontation. It's like, to me, it's two machines banging into each other over and over again. And I could give a rat's ass. I don't relate personally to anybody on the field. I don't see anybody's faces. I don't know anybody's person. One or two guys, their personality, but otherwise they're all interchangeable parts.
I mean, here I am as a kid. I grew up a fan of baseball and then of football because I was covering that. It was one of the first things I covered as a member of the media. I have become a massive hockey fan in the last 10, 15 years.
Great. I love hockey, but I like it in the arena.
See, I agree with you there. To me, there is no greater, more perfectly conditioned, faster, intelligent athlete in the world than the professional hockey player. I will put them in all those categories against anybody. And when I ever get into an argument with that and somebody says, well, they're not nearly as tough as football players.
That's horseshit.
Stop just a minute here.
Go into an NHL locker room and look at all the teeth in the paper cups and tell me how tough they're not.
I just watch them and I am amazed out of all the athletes I watch. I'm amazed at the skill level that a hockey player, they're playing both offense and defense.
Skating alone. Skating alone. Just go out and skate at 40 miles an hour and turn on a dime and chase the puck and go into the boards, get up, get down. The goaltenders flopping all over the place, getting right back up on their feet. Tremendous skill set. I agree with you. And another thing that people don't realize because of the bulky uniforms is what kind of shape these guys are in.
Oh, incredible.
I mean,
they are the best conditioned athletes in the world.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't like the game all that much on television.
See, I get along with it on television because, unfortunately, for so many years, it was the only way that I could watch it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But now I'm sitting in South Florida now, and I have, as a Boston Bruins fan, I am beaten up.
You're in the hockey capital of the world now.
It is, and people say to me, "You just hate the Panthers."
They can't even make ice down there. I mean, Jesus.
I give them an incredible amount. They are the best team. Look, I've told people in the last couple of weeks here, I would not bet against them for a three-peat. They're that good. Yeah. I mean, but I watch them, and I'm always amazed at the incredible amount of skill that they have, and that's why I've become this huge hockey fan. And I love it when people tell me that they could get on the ice and they could play hockey. It's not that tough. Bullshit. There's an outside chance.
Never heard anybody say that.
There's an outside chance that I could hit a fastball from a major leaguer. Outside. It's 1 in a million, outside. But there's a chance. Now there's a chance.
Only this is how you could do it. If you knew it was coming, okay? If you had no suspicion that you were going to get a curveball or a slider or a changeup. If the guy said, I'm going to throw you a fastball, it's going to be waist high, it's going to be right here, I'll give you an outside shot.
Look, I'm sitting at...
The problem with baseball is you don't know what the hell they're going to throw or where it's going to be.
I'm a member of the media a billion years ago at Miami Stadium, the old baseball stadium before they knocked it down. And doing an exhibition strictly for the media that day was an old guy named Bob Feller.
Oh, yeah.
Feller came in, and he was throwing against us. I got in the batting cages for a week just to hit everything I possibly could. I'm thinking, no big deal. Bob's like in his 60s right now. It'll be easy. I'll get out and I'll take a shot. I get up to the plate. Feller throws me something that I have never seen in my life, that it moved with like an F1 car coming down an S curve, and it just made me look stupid as hell. And this is an old guy. He must have been, he had to be in his 60s at that point. But
right. Well, you realize right away, this is not the game I was playing.
But Feller, in the next pitch, he laughs and he throws me. He said, "Here's one easy. I'll throw you a fastball." Exactly as you said. And he threw the fastball. I took it out.
Wow. Very good.
I took it out. And
very good.
That, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've just hit a home run against a 60-something former major leaguer. That's it. But,
Something to be proud of.
I loved it. It was great. It was fun. And I can see myself maybe making
If I go to a batting cage, I can hit anything. And as fast as it comes again, I know exactly where it's going to be. I know exactly what it's throwing. You put me in a game, and I played many media games. The Yankee beat writers will play against the Red Sox.
Oh, they're serious
Every year. Yeah, we play one game at Yankee Stadium, one game at Fenway, and I look forward to it every year. But they had a pitcher who would pitch at Northeastern, and he was pretty good. And I couldn't hit him because he kept me off balance. He'd throw a fastball, and the next one, would drop off the table, and the next one would be in here. You could never really dig in and get a good shot at it. And that's the difference between hitting in the batting cage and hitting against a professional pitcher.
Which goes back to that. I know that I can maybe hit in the majors if somebody throws me. Again, knowing exactly what's coming. The way you put it is perfect.
They generally don't tell you.
I don't see them tipping it unless they've got something working with an old Pete Rose gambling type, but that's another story
like
altogether.
Willie Mays, and they want to groove one for you so you can hit your 600th.
Right. I can think of myself, maybe I was a pretty good shooter in basketball. I could maybe, if I was completely left alone, nobody touched me, I could make a three. I know that. Okay? In football, I know if nobody touches me and nobody hits me and nobody drives my teeth into the back of my throat, I can catch a ball that's thrown to me from 20 yards. I can do that. Okay. There's no way in hell I'm getting on the ice and taking any chance whatsoever of having my physical body discorporated by basically being torn apart by one hit from these guys. No way.
And those tough SOBs. I had talked to George Chuvalo about this, the great Canadian heavyweight, and I said, man, you would have been the greatest goon in history. And he said, I'm the only Canadian who can't skate. Could you imagine, him dropping the gloves, the guy that was never knocked down by anybody, and he fought Frazier, Foreman, Ali, he took shots from everybody. He would be a murderer in the NHL. Unfortunately, he couldn't skate.
And I had to do it on skates.
That's the tough part. It's an easy game until the skating part comes in.
The last time I got on skates was a year ago, where I went to where the Florida Panthers train, and they had the basic skate. Everybody's there, and they bring in the public, and I slapped the skates on. I hadn't put the skates on for maybe 10 years. Right. Okay, I was a hell of a roller skater and a good blader, and I'm a good skier. But I got on those skates and I got out there. Some kid who was maybe about 10 years old bumped into me at the best he could, knocked me down. Me down, and the next thing I know, big old shiner, baby. And my wife is looking at me going, let's take a picture and put this down for memory. It's like a 10-year-old kid who took me out on the ice.
I will say it's a little bit easier to skate with a hockey stick because it gives you a third point of balance.
It gives you a balance point.
I found it a little bit easier to skate with a stick.
Speaking of balance, I wanted to make sure that I tell people now, you're training people at the Y, right? That's what you're doing these days?
Yes, I am. 6 days a week.
Which Y are you at?
It's in Huntington, Long Island.
Okay.
Which is in Suffolk County, about 25 miles from the city. And we have a huge turnout. I started with one class 2.5 years ago with about 6 people in it. Now I've got over 100 people who come in and out. We do it 6 times a week. They love it. The women really like it. A lot of times, I'll say to them, just hit me like you're the person, like I'm the person you hate more than anyone in the world. And they do. And it's usually an ex-boyfriend or an ex-husband. Sometimes it's a current husband. It's a great workout. They lose weight. They see results. And they like to hit things. People, going to your original point, people like to hit things.
People like to hit things. They like to be able to say, hey, look what I can do with one shot.
It is a skill. They do learn a skill. They do. They learn something that they did not know how to. And you know what? They all say the same thing to me. I had no idea how difficult this was.
You wouldn't want to franchise and come down here and train an old redhead sportscaster by any chance, would you, Wally?
Why not? For the right money, I'll do
Oh,
anything.
money? What, money? Are you serious now? It'll be
No,
cheaper. It'll be
love.
cheaper for me to get a JetBlue flight and come up to Huntington.
I'll do it for the love. Yeah, maybe you should do that because at least I get paid here in Huntington.
Think about it. Oh yeah, and by the way, this whole thing about wanting to do a sport one time, Angelo Dundee, God rest the man's soul, he befriended me and introduced me to Ali and all his gang and all that when they were training. And one time I'm working for Channel 6 in Miami, and I decide to go out and I do a story with Angie where he puts me in with a couple of his fighters. And I hadn't been in a ring since maybe I tried Golden Gloves when I was a kid, wasn't any good at it whatsoever. Stuck me in there at the ring, headgear, everything. I'll tell my guys to go easy on you. One shot, that's it. I'm out. I said, thanks, Angie. I'm gone.
But
Kid
unlike
hit me,
your
kid hit me
MMA
right
crowd,
here.
you did it. You climbed the steps, and that's the important thing.
Kid hit me right
All right.
here, and it was like you could tell that he was enjoying it. And I saw stars.
Yeah, but you know what? You got in there and you did it.
Oh yeah, and you know something? I got back in again, and a couple of times more. I got back in again, and I got back in again. I wish I'd have stayed with it because it was probably the single best form of conditioning I had ever gone through in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fought into my 50s. I fought about once a year, every year, for like 30 years. And I loved it, and I would do it. If anybody would license a 68-year-old, I'd do it tomorrow. But I tell my
Wait a minute. Hold on. Let's get on the phone. I have a promoter who's willing to put you in with Jake Paul.
Okay, I'm listening. $20 million to take. Do I have to take the dive like the rest of them? No, but I tell I have some students who actually want to box and want to fight. And I say to them, look, you're doing fine here, but the thing is you have to get in and spar and you've got to get hit because you got to see whether or not you like it. A lot of people, they get hit once and they go, this is not for me. Other guys get hit and say, I can take this. I'll come back and do this again tomorrow. I said, until you do that, you're not even considering fighting.
Yeah, I would go back and do it just for the conditioning side of things because I was never in better condition in my life. And right now,
we'll put you up in the guest room and we'll train.
You better be real careful because there's going to be a time when the wife is going to be out visiting the kids, and I'm going to say I got a couple of days, and I got that $99 if it's still there, that $99 JetBlue flight to LaGuardia.
The offer is open.
It's open. Wally, I said at the top of the show, I've been a big fan of yours since the first time I read you. I read everything that you put out. I loved your stuff. I still do to this day. I wish you were writing again, but just doing this is
cathartic.
One of us. This is cathartic enough. Anytime you want to spew, do anything, talk sports, please come on anytime. We'll talk about anything because it's the only show that I've ever been on in my life where I'm not afraid to say the word bullshit. So
okay. And there's plenty of things to call bullshit about.
If we got to do it, we could do the 24-hour show. I've thought about that sometime, just calling it the bullshit show. But YouTube told me they wouldn't put it on the air.
Is that right? We never run out of topics, that's for sure.
We wouldn't run out. Wally, thanks so much. I appreciate it. The best to you, best to your family.
I had fun.
It's always a pleasure. He's Wallace Matthews, absolutely one of the all-time best. Thanks so much for listening. Don't forget on podcast, wherever you get your podcast, search us out. YouTube channel, Fastest Show in Sports. Get us there. Please subscribe. Make us successful enough so I can catch a flight and go up to Huntington and learn how to box all over again and do it properly. For Wallace Matthews, I'm Ed Berliner. Rock on, true believers. Till next time. See ya!
That's all, folks.